This is the Nice Time Racing Zeta top mount turbo kit for the Ka24det. The first thing I noticed when I picked this manifold up is just how beefy and heavy it is. It seems to be all cast aside from the straights. They offered in a twin scroll dual wastegate or a single wastegate V-band, which is what I have. I was really undecided whether or not to run a recirculated wastegate, which is a service that they do offer, but that's kind of how I have my car now, is with an internal wastegate. So I figured I can try an external gate, and if I don't like it, then I can always just get it recirced later, and at least then I know if I do like it or I don't. On my STI Civic, I did have an external wastegate. On that car, it wasn't like super annoyingly loud. On some manifolds and some kits, the wastegate is really obnoxiously loud and doesn't sound good, in my opinion, but with this being a longer pipe, it shouldn't be too loud. I have never heard any sound clips of this turbo setup, so I have no idea what it's going to sound like. I kind of have an idea, but regardless, I know this thing's going to sound sick, especially out of my Ka24det, whatever it is, GT-OZ1, I think it is. It's a mouthful. This is the turbo setup that I had on it, which is the new ISR bottom mount manifold with a twisted motion GTX 2871R V4, which is basically has G-series wheels and aerodynamics, but in the frame of a T28. On the old ISR bottom mount manifolds for the K8T I can speak on, I don't know about the SR, but the ports were circles, so that obviously wasn't good. Then they switched over to the square, but as you can see, there was some overlap, definitely some performance being lost there. I trust this a lot more. And here's some more stuff like the turbo, which is the tried and true GTX 3071R that I got from my buddy secondhand. So here's my dyno graph. First off, I just want to say I do have the big Tomei cam, which supposedly kills a lot of mid-range. So it came into boost unbelievably hard, and it ripped. And then once you hit 5K, everything after that, that last 2200 RPM, this just felt NA. Like it stopped pulling, and I really don't like that. And I don't mind losing some mid-range because, man, it comes into boost so hard, and it just has like nothing up top, which is what you would expect from a smaller turbo like a GTX 2871R. What I'm really looking for with this new setup is a more linear power band, something that pulls a little more up top, and I definitely want to get rid of a little more mid-range just for the sake of having a more linear power band, and that's kind of what I feel like I'll want more for drifting. And that's also why I decided to go with a GTX 3071R instead of like a G series, which would spool faster and give me more mid-range. I'm just looking for more linear power band, something that doesn't just hit and then run out of power up top. So, which was really kind of killed the car, because once that torque would fall off, it felt like the car was laying over. Like it just hit so hard, and then it just kind of nothing. And it wasn't even like satisfying to rev it out past that. You kind of felt guilty. You felt like you were doing something bad, revving it out past that. And it just didn't, I would just short shift because it wasn't even too satisfying. But enough talking. Let's start tossing this on. Although I do want to say one more thing. I want to show you guys one more thing before we do that. If your car has an ignition cut rev limiter, two-step, spits flames, and you run a normal composite exhaust manifold gasket, it'll blow out the first time your car shoots flames, and then you'll have an exhaust leak. Metal gaskets leak. My engine builder put me onto these gaskets, and it's kind of like a one-time use thing, and it like squishes. I'll show you when I unbox it, but yeah, honestly, these are really good, and I would recommend these to anyone, and you won't have any problems. And I know other people with other engines who also run these and love them, so. I had to move the power steering reservoir from right there to over here because the turbo is going to be in the way, which means I used to have my coolant reservoir right there, and I had to move it over here. So just wanted to point that out. Looks cool. If you have a normal OEM reservoir, I think it will work, but I don't, so. Manifold is all bolted down. There weren't really any annoying nuts to try to get on, so thank you Nice Time for that. The only one is this one was a little tricky to get at, but you can get a 17 mil socket on there, and this one you got to get from underneath. My other manifold was really hard to get off, the ISR one. This back bolt, because the manifold comes up, it was really hard to get at. You couldn't get at it from the back, and if you did, it was with a stubby, and you just didn't have enough leverage to actually break it loose. So as you can see, had to grind that down, fit it in between there, and just slowly get at it. So if you do get that ISR manifold, this is what you're gonna need to do to be able to get it on and off, because it was put on by my engine builder with the engine out of the car, but yeah, manifold is in, looking sick. I think the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put the wastegate on and see how that all routes. We got Turbo Smart wastegates, what they recommend, and also love Turbo Smart. Raceport is the best sounding blow off valve. It's now Sunday the next day, but we have a problem. The turbo kit did not come with a V-band for the turbo, and since I got the turbo secondhand from a friend, I don't know if that V-band is something that's supposed to come with the turbo, but regardless, the car's supposed to be getting picked up to go to the dyno tomorrow on Monday. The car is not getting tuned tomorrow, but it was at least gonna get dropped off, and I was gonna pick it up sometime the following week, hopefully. I can overnight a V-band through Amazon Prime, and then I should be able to just drop the car off on Tuesday, and that shouldn't really make a difference. But in the meantime, I still got a lot of stuff I need to do. I got the turbo clocked already, at least the exhaust side with the center. I got all my fittings on already. Make sure that you always use an oil restrictor fitting or you'll blow your turbo up. I use banjo fittings for the coolant stuff. You definitely don't want to use like normal AN90s on a bottom mount. That's what I did at first, and then there's absolutely no way to get a wrench in there or get it out in the car. So I switched over to banjos, so then you can just slide a ratchet with a socket on it and just get it off, and it's easy. There's really no reason to run an AN hose for your coolant. You don't need it. I just use fuel hose and a clamp, and makes life a lot easier. So it's a month later. It was a mad dash getting this thing ready for the dyno. So I had to put the camera down and stop filming because I just need to get this thing done. Luckily, we did make it to the dyno. It got tuned, and I'll just show you it right now. I pulled it out so you guys could see it a little better. Still kind of dark, but coolant lines out of the way, oil drain out of the way, everything is out of the way. This turbo kit's actually really nice. Wastegate, easy to get at even though it might not look like it. Turbo blanket's a little there. I recently swapped out my engine mounts for OEM mounts. I had GK Tech, which I would recommend, but with having a stock transmission, I really don't want to break it. I do want to do the Z32 soon, like probably over the winter, but as for right now, I really don't want to break this trans. So I heard that if you run the stock OEM mounts, that really saves your transmission. So I swapped those out, and I had a comment on a video before asking if my K-Series coil packs hit my strut bar because it was hitting theirs, and I was like, no. Put these mounts in, and yeah, it's pretty close now. If you stick your hand up and bend it up and tighten it, it's fine. I also flappered a little bit of the lip off the coil pack, and that helps. But yeah, the OEM mounts do raise the engine up a little bit, and that leads me into my next thing. I can't really speak on the fitment of this turbo kit because I think it was designed around having aftermarket mounts. So one problem I did have was the downpipe hitting the underside of the car. I hammered it up as much as I could, and then actually, when I brought the car to the shop that tuned it, Lindgren Supercars, they modified the downpipe, so now everything's all good. So that was really the only thing. But aside from that, this turbo kit's been awesome. So here's the dyno graph. Blue is 26 PSI, which is high boost, and red is 12 PSI, which is wastegate. It made 360, 307 on E at 12 PSI on the Garrett GTX 3071R, and then on 26 PSI it made 436 horsepower and 309 foot-pounds of torque, and that's also without having the wastegate routed up as a quick spool. One way to think about it is torque is that pit in your stomach, and horsepower is how hard you get sucked into the seat. Honestly, kind of wasn't expecting the graph to be this linear, but this is exactly what I wanted. So on the old turbo setup, it made 300 foot-pounds of torque at about 4,200 RPM. The top mount made 300 foot-pounds of torque at about 4,300 RPM. The old setup made 300 horsepower at 5,000 RPMs, and the top mount made 300 horsepower at about 4,300 RPM. So the bigger turbo on the KA actually spools up faster, and people were telling me that, and it makes sense because this is a decently big engine for what it is. It's basically the size of a 1J or an RB25, so it needs a turbo that's going to be good on a 1J or an RB25, and that is the good old GTX 3071R. So why we stopped there is I have a White Bunny clutch in here, and I've been told by other people who have that clutch that it starts slipping after 400 foot-pounds of torque. So we just stopped at 390 foot-pounds of torque, and honestly the car is stupidly fast. I haven't even driven it on high boost. I've only driven it on E85 on wastegate, so the 360 tune. I picked the car up early in the week, drove it home. My alignment was kind of messed up, so I didn't get into boost at all. I just wanted to make it home so I could tidy things up, just dial it in. And then when Friday came along, I took Jordan out and we went for the first drive in it. I live out in the country. We got into town. I did a second gear pull. I got into third a little bit, and then we started hearing this weird like clunking ticking noise. So I pulled over, and basically what we figured out was that the handbrake cable touched the drive shaft and it kind of like got caught on it, and it was hitting the U-joint and making that sound. So we drove it back to my house, put it up on the jack stands, fixed it, and then we took it back into town, stopped by this little pop-up meet, said hi to some random people, and then we basically just took it back, only had it out for about an hour. I did like maybe 10 second gear pulls. Like I didn't even really do third, just like a little bit in the third, but not really. I just wanted to give Jared a ride too, and Jordan. I didn't want to push my luck or break it because we were going to go drifting the next day. We left in the morning. We drove like an hour and 45 minutes to Union Grove. Car had no issues. Got up on grid, did 2 corners, and the car started rod knocking. At first, I thought it was just that handbrake cable again making the clunking noise, but I got back in grid and I noticed that it was making that noise as I was free revving it and not moving, and then that's when I got scared and I pulled out my phone and I recorded this. I'm super bummed out of everything that like I didn't get any sound clips, any pulls. I don't have any videos of me driving this car at all. Like I barely drove this when I got it back. It's the STI Civic all over again. Like I've never even heard it from the outside aside from like the dyno clips I have. But we'll get more into that in the next video. As for like the turbo kit, the turbo, and just like the car as a whole, I am grateful that I at least got to rip it for what I did. And like I said, I only drove it on gate, so like there's still like a whole 100 more horsepower in there that we can have fun with. And I'm gonna be honest, this car is stupidly fast. This car is retardedly fast, and I love it. Like, I'm never gonna be able to get bored with this. This thing is so raw. Like, yeah, it's pretty. I say this a lot, but like, man, this thing drives so good. It's so fast, sounds sick, and I'm just bummed. I'm absolutely dying to drift it, but yeah, as for the turbo kit, really couldn't be any happier with it, man. This whole thing is just sick. So I guess I'll end it here. Thanks for watching. If you like Ka24det stuff, subscribe, drop a like, and I'll see you soon.